to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now from our Abuja studio is Issa Aremu, the Deputy President of the Nigerian Labour Congress. Nigerian workers were late last year awarded a national minimum wage of 30,000 by President Muhammadu Buhari after several months of fruitless negotiations between the federal government and representatives of organized labor. However, there are indications that the new minimum wage may still prove to be a bridge too far in the wake of most states of the Federation still struggling to discharge their financial responsibilities in the midst of competing priorities. We'll be discussing this with Issa Aremu, but at the same time, he will also comment on Nigeria's democratic process as Nigerians prepare for tomorrow's inauguration day on May 29. Issa Aremu is Vice President, Industrial Global Union, member of the National Executive Committee of the Nigeria Labour Congress. He was even governorship candidate of the Labour Party in Kwara State during the 2019 elections. Issa Aremu, welcome to the morning show.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Ruben.
Yes, in fact, I should have said Comrade Issa Aremu. Comrade, it's good to have you again on the morning show. But before we talk about labor issues, minimum wage and all of that, let's talk about democracy. Tomorrow it will be 20 years since Nigerians returned to civilian rule. What's your assessment of that 20-year journey in terms of what we've been able to achieve, what we have failed to achieve, and the political party system and the actors within the space since 1999?
Well, thank you so much, Ruben, and maybe through you, let me say Happy Democracy Day in advance. By tomorrow, we should be celebrating, as you said, 20 years of uninterrupted democratic process. But you also know that why not because of the military intervention in 1966, we should be talking effectively of 59 years of democratic process. You know, in fact, we should be talking of celebrating 60th anniversary of democracy because it was democracy that gave us independence. Nigeria got independence by the activism of the First Republic politicians, you know, with vibrant political parties. So why not because of military intervention, we should be talking of almost 60 years of democratic process. If we had used 1979 as the benchmark, you know, we also returned to democratic rule in 1979. By now, we should be talking of 40 years of democratic process. And if you have taken 1989, when the IBB military government proclaimed the new constitution, we should be talking of 30 years of democratic process. And why not? Because of annulment of June 12 elections. If you take 1993, we should be talking of 26 years of democratic process. So the point I'm raising here is that democracy has been part of our heritage in this country. Our founding fathers and mothers were Democrats who formed political parties. You know, the first political parties, NCNC, you know, which was the pioneer political party. You had the NEPO, the Northern Element People's you know, you have the AG, Action Group, of course, you have the MPC. I mean, these were parties, democratic parties that fought for independence. Unfortunately, the military adventurism put us on reverse gear. I have to underscore this point because South Africa returned to democracy in 1994, courtesy of our struggle, of our support and solidarity. Now South Africa is marking 25 years of democratic process. We are just about to mark 20 years of uninterrupted democratic process. I think it's still nonetheless worthwhile to celebrate, and I think we should be looking forward to not just the next 20 years, but the next 50 years. Never again should anybody rule us, you know, without having our democratic mandate. This last 20 years has been quite remarkable. There has not been dull moment. You know, we started with just about 3 political parties in 1999. Now Nigeria has close to 90 political parties, quantitatively, so we can say in terms of political parties. were possibly the highest in the continent, if you want to put it that way. This latest election that we just concluded, 83 or 84 million registered voters. That's almost the size of Egypt, twice almost the size of South Africa. So if you look at it quantitatively in terms of registered voters, this democracy destination. We're also moving towards another transition now. We have the fourth democratically elected president, maybe the second re-elected. So in terms of motions, if you want to put it that way, there have been a lot of political motions. We've produced a lot of governors, at a point, a elected president was lost election and he accepted the outcome of election. So in that way, we've done very well. But Ruben, we can also discuss further, qualitatively, how far have we done? I think this is where I have my own reservation that, yes, we have the highest number of parties in Africa, 90 political parties, compared to South Africa, which has about 24 political parties. Ghana, almost the same number, 24, 23. But qualitatively, the difference is not clear within these political parties. Ideologically, it's not clear. Compared to the First Republic political party, Second Republic, in which you are clear what the party stood for. So now there is no clear cut. Somebody can be in a party in the morning, in the afternoon, he moves to another party, in the evening, he jumps to another one. You have butterfly politicians, for to put it that way, who stood for nothing and fell for anything. So I think we can discuss it better, but I want to say it's worthwhile to celebrate democracy. Don't forget, we talk of 20 years of democracy. Maybe we should also know the 20 years before we return to democracy. And Ruben, you know what we all went through in this country under military dictatorship, violation of civil liberties, press was ganged. Taking my background, I do Nigeria Labour Congress, NSC, National Executive Council, was dissolved twice by BB, by Abacha military regimes, and in the case of Nopeng, Franco Kori was detained for a couple of years for fighting for democracy. So I think as we are lamenting, or we may be talking of the current challenges with our democracy, we should also not forget where we are coming from, that it was quite bad in terms of military dictatorship. But as I've said, quantitatively, Nigerians have recorded remarkable progress. But in terms of quality of this process, I think we need what I want to call quality control of this democratic process. I don't also forget democracy is not just the means, it's also be an end to deliver good governance. It's a sad commentary today that the gap between the rich and the poor is widening every other day. We're still a country that is energy poor. With all the effort that have been put in place by the current government, there's still not yet the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of electricity supply. Many factories are still under lock and key. They are yet to reopen. Although commendably, we've seen a lot of activism in recent time. Industrial policy have been put in place, but they are coming so late and so token. But better late than never. So, Ruben, in summary, let me put it this way to your first question. That now we now have 20 years of democratic process, but that could have been longer than that. Don't forget that Ghana, almost we started the transition in 1992, 1993. Ghana has moved on. Ghana may be celebrating almost close to 30 years of uninterrupted democratic process. So I think we need to underscore this point so that there are a lot of reactionary forces who are still having nostalgia of returning back to the past. I think we should condemn that. That cannot be the way forward.
Okay,
On the contrary,
when you talk about...
we should be the democracy demonstration in Africa, and we should be able to lead the continent towards the democratic process.
Comrade, you raised the issue of...
Yes,
you raised the question of governance, and you talked about qualitatively how far have we done and all that. But let's bring this to the level of the common man in Nigeria. People have always been asking for what they call democracy dividends, right? You must have heard that expression, the dividends of democracy.
Yes, I'm hearing.
Yeah, when you compare military rule and civilian rule, will you say that, return to civilian rule has delivered on its promise in terms of, dividends for the people themselves?
Yeah, well, it depends on what parameter you've used, but by and large, democracy, I share that view that delivers prosperity better than dictatorship, for obvious reasons, because democracy is participatory, we can do a lot of engagement. You don't need to even talk of the last 20 years of democratic process. Maybe look at the point I raised before. Nigeria used to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. When me and you were in university, we used to talk of a developing nation. Manufacturing was contributing close to about 24% of our GDP on the eve of that military coup. Most of the industry that we had were built in the 60s, and that was the democratic Nigeria. Democratic Nigeria also put up development plan. We had the first development plan, second development plan, which if we had followed through, without the military intervention and the subsequent distortions, prosperity will have gone concurrently with democratic process. But back to my constituency, because I also speak for what you call common men and women. In the case of organized labor, the first minimum wage, we didn't get it under military. We got it in 1981, under democratic government of President Muhammad Buhari. Of course, we also had a very strong macroeconomic stability that time. It was 125 naira, and when you look at the exchange rate of naira that time, that was almost about $250, which means as at 81 in a democratic Nigeria. If you translate it today, with the best of effort now that we have put in place 30,000 minimum wage, if you look at the exchange rate, you know that minimum wage today is less than $100, which means in terms of earning power, purchasing power of the working people in the 80s, Nigerian workers were far more better off. But I also want to say, so the return to democracy in 1999 has also given space for labor to demand for improvement in pay, which was put. Military actually trampled on our right to demand for improvement living wage. So it took democratic government of President Obasanjo, of course, with the push of labor, for us to improve our minimum wage. That time, Comrade was the NSC president, and we had the minimum wage improvement of 7,500 naira at the federal level, state almost about 6,500. And of course, that President Jonathan, because of the democratic space, we also took the advantage to improve to 18,000 minimum wage. So if you look at the dynamics that democracy offers for people to push for their for the improvement in their living condition, because democracy, the beauty of it is not so much that you are the mercy of those who you have elected. You also have the power and the space for you to make them to deliver on promise. We've also improved on minimum wage now from 18,000. Now we are talking of 30,000. So not because of lack of effort, but there are also a number of issues that are not in place now, which means we've also got macroeconomic instability. Naira has been massively devalued, although it's a bit more stable now under the CBN. And for a long time, the new civilian class that emerged had not really had an eye on national development. I just listened to your commentary this morning on the issue of, where you are playing back President Buhari's interview. Why will it take us now that we're just signing the budget for 2019 in May? And if you look at it cumulatively for the past 5 years, there has been delayed budget. I'm not here to make comment whether it's coming from executive or the legislature, but the bottom line is that we need to reinvent the new political class, in this dispensation, that we have an eye on national development. And once there is the commitment that we want to build a nation, we want to secure the welfare of our people and security of our people as proclaimed by the Constitution, there will only be some basis for compromise and understanding. But for
Thank
the
you,
last
comrade.
2 decades, if you ask me very well, it's motions without movement.
Okay,
In
thank
terms
you,
of proper
comrade.
quality
Now, we're
of life. But
definitely...
we need to reinvent the new political class, as we used to have in the First Republic and the Second Republic, in which, in spite of their ideological differences, they have a common goal, to serve their people.
Thank you, comrade.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to get into a discussion with regards to the new minimum wage in Nigeria and, of course, your views and the views of the NLC with regards to that. Now, however, before we do move on to that topic, you did describe Nigeria as a democracy destination of Africa. Now, I'm guessing that's to do with the fact that we're the largest population in Africa and the largest black population in the world. And, of course, our economy once upon a time was Africa's most developing economy, even though Rwanda has overtaken on that by now. However, you also mentioned, you were speaking to us about the fact that there is motion in our democracy. Now, in an interview that you did around the election times during your gubernatorial elections, you described our democracy as motion without movement. Now, that being said, I want to ask you what your projections are for Nigeria's democracy over the next 4 years. Our president is being sworn in for his second term tomorrow, so of course those projections are important before we move on to discuss the national minimum wage.
Yeah, I'm not really sure whether I got it properly because there's a network crisis listening to you here. But when I talk of motions without movement, what I'm trying to say is that motions must lead to qualitative movement. And I want you to get me right, what we need to deepen democracy further. What we have currently, insufficiency democracy, we need to have more democracy. There should be more inclusion as much as possible. Not just in terms of people who are participating in political process, men and women in particular, but there should be more inclusive policy, to overcome this level of inequality in our country. And this is why the demand for new minimum wage is very, very significant for us, because it's also one way to bridge the gap between the working people who live miserably on low pay and those who have the means of production and who have earning power in the country. So to that extent, I think I want to also salute the organized labor for keeping up the spirit to make it possible. And I'm also quite excited that the government has gotten it right, that implementation must start from April. So it's now a correct signal to all the new governorship elects that they have a lot to do to be able to improve the welfare of their people. Because this democracy can only be deepened if we improve on productivity. But you can't have productivity if you don't have productive workforce. Of course, you can't have productive workforce if they are not well motivated and they are not well remunerated. So that's extremely very, very significant. They also had you, if I got it properly, because the network is a bit bad, but I think I had you talking of the fact that we are a democracy destination. I've said so very well in terms of number, in terms of quality, but we could do more. It's not just that we have the highest number of political parties, which we do, and I even think at 90 political parties, parties per capita in Nigeria is still very low compared to our population, 200 million. But what makes political parties not just the number, it's the quality of the program and the visions that guide these parties. For now, these parties are not really, the difference is not clear, as I've said before. And I think I want to suggest here on this platform that immediately after the inauguration, I think we should have a kind of, bipartisan conference on how to consolidate the parties. That's the way we consolidate on the banks. I mean, you can't decree that parties should not be formed, but we need to consolidate them in a way that progressive parties could come together, people share different views and ideas. You also come together so that electorate should be able to have a choice. And INEC has a critical role to play on this. The way INEC has unnecessarily over-liberalized licensing of parties, the names are even conflicting. I mean, I ran under Labour Party. I was shocked that there will be a party also sharing similar name. I mean, Zenith Labour Party. And if you take other parties, they are like that. I think there is a lot of confusion. I think now that we are overcome election, we should sit down and consolidate on those parties and make sure that internal democracy works very well. I mean, look at the judgment in Safara. Are we now back to a situation in which court will now be determined who is the governor? And ideally, I mean, if you take Ghana, you take South Africa, elections, internal democracy take place in their party in such a way that their candidates are clear. But in Nigeria, the more you see, the less you understand. There is more internal implosion within the party such that governors exert so much power, they put their candidates, and then now party members have to seek redress in the court of law, with all the judgment. Although that's also healthy because at least the court has shown that is the last hope of anybody agree. But ideally, internal political parties process should be able to throw out the candidates in a way that we don't need to be, having governors who are never on ballot papers, who don't have enough numbers, of the electorate. So you distort the expression of the electorate. So that's exactly the point I'm raising. Then you talk about population. Let me also add quickly, I think population is an asset. It shouldn't be a liability. Where you say Nigeria, 200 million people, well, we may look big compared to Ghana, to South Africa, but you are nothing compared to India, 1.3 billion people, China, 1.5 billion people. And the Chinese have shown that population is an asset, not a liability. But how do they do so?
Comrade.
You need to educate your people. You need to feed them very well. We already lost on Millennium Development Goals, which ended 2015. Now we have new Sustainable Development Goals.
Comrade, let's take on a number of other issues.
I think we should face that squarely now.
Yeah, let's take on a number of other issues. First, the new national minimum wage.
Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt you earlier when you said it was President Buhari that signed it, the 1981 new minimum wage. As at 1981, I thought President Shehu Shagari was the one who signed that 1981 new national minimum wage bill.
Yes, 1981. That's what I meant. President Shehu Shagari.
But you said President Buhari. Anyway, that's a small point.
To civil rule.
The Minister of Labour has been in the news lately, drawing attention to the fact that some states have not started paying the new national minimum wage. And that those employers of labor, either at the state level or in the private sector, should realize that, it's a matter of law. What's your take on this? Do you have any fears that going forward, some of these states where even teachers' salaries are not paid, where workers are being owed over 30 months, do you have any fears that they may not be able to pay the 30,000 minimum wage? And if that happens, what should we expect from labor?
Yeah, I don't think any serious employer labor, and above all, any state governor or local government chairman, we not have respect for the law that has been passed by the National Assembly of Nigeria. I absolutely agree with Minister Ngige that the new minimum wage is a law that should be implemented. And we're not here to start renegotiating the new minimum wage because we've done that negotiation for almost about 18 months, if not effectively 2 years, where the tripartite body set up by President Muhammad Buhari, in 2017, made up of organized labor, employers' labor, and of course, for the first time, that committee was far more inclusive to also include state governors. Almost about 7 of them were represented on that. And we've negotiated. Don't forget that the demand of NLC was 56,000 naira minimum wage. But after a lot of negotiation and compromises, we came to 30,000. So it's not time to be renegotiating over it's time for implementation. And some self-enlightened governors and employers, including private sector, have started implementing. I know of governors who have made a commitment to say they are going to pay, they factor into their budget, and I want to commend the federal government under President Muhammad Buhari for putting the machinery in place for implementation. So as far as we are concerned, it's time for implementation, of course. Because it's a matter of law, any employer that refuses to comply, there's a provision for sanctions within the law. But above all, those who do not pay, of course, workers do not work for them. And I think the Nigeria Labour Congress is clear about that mandate. We've come a long way in this. I've given you a memory lane that the first minimum wage was 1981 by President Shehu Shagari, I'm happy that you made that correction. And we have subsequent review by President Obasanjo, President Goodluck Jonathan, so we can't lower the standard in terms of implementation. Exactly the way the previous one have been implemented, this one must also be implemented. And I think it's also important to underscore the fact that we cannot be determining the standard based on some recalcitrant employers, including state governors who divide public funds meant for public good. We shouldn't be using their own yardstick to judge the best performing governors. And I know there are a couple of governors who know that the best way to get their state running is for them to motivate and pay their workforce.
Absolutely,
Don't forget that most states' economies are run based on the pay of the working people. That's what market women rely upon, because workers pay to buy basic goods and services. So I've no doubt in my mind there won't be any fear about implementation. But we have the right, just exactly the way we got these wages. Don't forget that we had cause to demonstrate. We even had a strike at a point for us to push ahead the need for this negotiation. Just
However,
the same way,
comrade,
we have the muscle within the context of organized labor, NSC, and TUC to make sure that it's implemented.
However, comrade, at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, one topic that we tend not to speak about as much when discussing the new national minimum wage is the fact that
talk louder.
if Nigerian citizens are still paying out of pocket for their basic welfare needs, including security, healthcare, and education, how relative does the new national minimum wage become? And what is the NLC currently doing or speaking on with regards to this? Because it is definitely the other end of the spectrum. We do have to look at the national minimum wage, but it's a bit difficult to assess without also looking into our education, healthcare, and security and other needs that we continue to pay out of pocket for.
Yeah, well, again, the reception is a bit poor, but I hope I can make sense out of your question. I mean, your comment. But I don't really think it's one or the other. You have to take all together. It's not, in fact, when you talk of minimum wage, we are really not addressing the real issue. The real issue is that there should be living wage, and it's not, we're not saying resources meant to pay the workforce should not be made available for education, for road, to address the other critical national issues of development. They go hand in hand. In fact, in any case, in all the sectors, you need working men and women to drive them. Whether it's in education, teachers have to be well paid. You can't deliver educational service without teachers. You can't do any construction, any roads without the construction workers. You can't produce any goods, in the manufacturing sector without the working people who work there. I'm from textile. One of the things that killed the textile industry, apart from energy crisis, smuggling, is also low purchasing power of Nigerians, because most of Nigerians can't buy new clothes. They rather prefer, second-hand clothes, which our place has become dumping ground for not just second-hand textile, but second-hand cars because of poor purchasing power. The only way you can make sure that automobile industry comes back is to pay Nigerian people, including workers, very well, in a way that they can buy made in Nigerian vehicles, whether it's bicycle, it is machine, it's cars.
Comrade.
In those days, there was once in Nigeria in which a worker could buy a new Peugeot car, because the purchasing power was there. So what I'm saying is I think we need holistic development.
Yeah, that point is very clear.
We missed some Millennium Development Goal. Now we have Sustainable Development Goal, which is more comprehensive and all-inclusive.
Yes, comrade, if I may just cut in here. Just one final question.
Yes.
And I'll be glad if we can just deal with that in less than a minute. What's your assessment of the recent face-off between the Minister of Labour and the NLC, a situation whereby we had a disagreement over the appointment of the chairman of the NSITF, and organized labor had to go to Ngige's home at 4 a.m. and then barricade the entrance to the house with a truck. Is that standard style for labor leaders?
Well, I think it's already an issue that it's been well discussed and well analyzed. But let me put it this way. I think you lay more emphasis on the reaction of Labour, but I think you should also look at what led to that. You know, I mean, the president made it known that he had appointed Frank Okori to be the chairman of NSITF. Even the minister of Labour accepted as much. I mean, why would you have to change the rules along the line? I mean, the rule of the game. At a point, the chairman of National Party, Comrade Shomole, had to cry aloud and ask the minister to make sure they constitute the board. I think things like this lead to crisis of governance. You know, I mean, if you ask me very well, the NSITF goes beyond the issue of who's the chairman, and so whether Issa Aremu is the chairman, Franco Correa, or even Ruben Abati is there. What is important is that that fund must deliver for the working people. It means to provide social protection for the workforce. But it's also labor market institution. It's actually workers' capital that is there. You know, employers contribute 1% of their earnings to fund that project. In a decent society, I mean, where things work very well, it should be run by people who have a labor background. Don't forget that Comrade Shomole used to be the chairman of NSITF for almost
thank you very much.
Almost 4 years when he was the NSC president. You know, so, I mean, president has been said before, and we're excited when the president announced Franco Correa to head the NSITF. But unfortunately, you really don't know how the system works, and I hope these are part of the issues President Buhari is expected to address in the next dispensation.
Well,
that,
thank you.
Know, we have to keep correct signal. When you make a pronouncement, we must get it through in a way that it doesn't lead to unnecessary friction. But otherwise, relations between the minister and Labour had been very constructive before. Don't forget that we related very well. That's how we got the new minimum wage. I mean, we didn't need to engage in some of those frictions that we had. Exactly what we were doing before.
Well, thank you.
Having better outcome. I think
thank you, comrade. I think the point is clear, and the president has tried to resolve the matter by appointing Chief Kokori as chairman of the Michael Imodu Institute of Labour Studies. And thank you for your time, and thank you for always honoring our invitation each time we invite you to come to the morning show.
Thank you, comrade.
It's time again for another short break. When we return, we shall be linking up with the former chairman of Nigeria Human Rights Commission, Professor Chidi Odinkalo. Stay with us.